Familia, welcome to the Re-Evolution podcast, broadcast, live stream, content nexus. I'm your host, Kevin Orosz. I'm joined here by the wizard, the mimetician, and the star council leader, which is what I want to name you, Paul Cooper, broadcasting live from the Transformation Agency headquarters in Boulder, Colorado.
Hey everybody, how's it going?
Wow. So Paul, I want to drop into some context here and just kind of tell a little bit about the story of how I came into your space. I definitely heard your name multiple different ways, but I met you in person in New Mexico at Collective Legacy. Shout out to Aloka and David Weber for setting that up, and met you and your boys, your squad there, fresh out of Burning Man.
Yeah.
And Paul was just like holding down a very unique frequency that I might name grounded, and also very multidimensional. And then last week here with my boys, Mystic Misfit, and a lot of our family and tribe, we just went through Light Leadership, episode 3.
Yep.
Yeah, which for those of you who don't know, I came in thinking it was like a mastermind or like some kind of, like entrepreneur conscious meetup event. And what it actually was unnameable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about, but I will say it was one of the most powerful, ceremonial, ritualistic, and coherence building group dynamics I'd ever been a part of. And Paul definitely embodies surrendered leadership, which is what I titled the video. So if you're down to check that out, I invite you to tune in and stay with us here. And yeah. Paul, maybe, I just want to know about your backstory and like how you went from, you mentioned you were born in Africa.
Well, I was a couple months old when my parents took me there.
Okay.
And they had already been living there, so they came back to the U.S. for the last term of pregnancy, so that I would be delivered in the U.S. and then went right back to Central Africa.
Wow.
And so I grew up on a missionary university in Rwanda, and as a kid just got to be outside, like running around in nature and exploring. My parents would kind of like be home by dark on your bike. And I had this little like wiener dog that was like our dog, and he would run around with us. And, keep the people that would follow us around from getting too close, and we'd just like go wherever.
Wow.
And,
pretty idealistic,
So it was it was amazing because we had a garden in the backyard and like went to the market, and so we grew up vegetarian. All the food that we ate was locally grown, and just like really holistic communal lifestyle. I got to walk in. There's like 20 other missionary families on the university, and I could just walk into any of their houses. I called them all aunt and uncle.
Nice.
And so it was just like everyone was like family.
Like true tribal living.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And so that was it was amazing, and that went until I was almost 9, and then we were on the way back from a family vacation with another family, and we stopped at the gas station. I switched cars, and about 10 minutes later my whole family got in a really bad car accident. And I kind of sensed something. We were in front of them, and they weren't behind us anymore, and so I stopped the driver the car that we were in, and we went back and got to the scene of the accident. My father was passed in the front seat. My mom and brothers were gone, and there was a crowd of people around, and so when they told us that they'd been taken to a little Catholic mission that was down the street, and so we went like a mile down the street, and when we got down there, I could hear my mom screaming, and they were like, I walked in to find her, and she was in a bathtub of her own blood, like legs were cut open, and my brothers were both being tended to, both hurt really bad. And so in that moment, I just was completely peaceful. I wasn't scared, I wasn't hurting. I just kind of had a sense that I just needed to witness them, and that everything was going to be okay. And like ended up comforting the people that I was riding with.
Wow. At 9 years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then that brought one of my brothers wasn't badly hurt enough to be airlifted, but my mom and my youngest brother were airlifted to Brussels, and then my other brother and I went to my dad's funeral in Rwanda, and then got sent to my mom's brother's house in South Carolina, where my mom grew up, and that started our journey in the U.S.
Wow. I mean, thanks for sharing that, brother. I mean, I know you shared that with me the first night before the event, and it's just like, I mean, yeah, never wish that upon anyone, and yet it also is woven into the DNA and the substance of your unique journey.
I mean, it's definitely been a defining factor in my journey, the whole way through, just because that pain has always been there. But at this point in my life, I look back on it all and see it as like this really beautiful and elegant initiation by life that I received, and like how it's all come full circle, and you know, the gifts that I like have gained like in the form of like who I've become as a result of it,
Right.
are pretty astounding. It's amazing how life works.
Yeah, and it's amazing how initiation finds us, whether we're ready for it or not.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I guess the point of asking that, and for my mind, it's like what you emerged out of is intrinsic in the man you are now, and the man I've seen in masterful form in facilitation and just in being. And so yeah, like let's fast forward a bit. Like, so you go back to the States, you've grown up in this like tribal, very like, you know, open kind of source community. Tragedy, initiation, blessing, whatever you want to name it, happens. And then you go into your kind of journey in the States. So.
Yeah. So I spent a little while, my mom is like a single mom, with us 3 kids, with 3 boys. You know, she lost her husband and like is now back in the United States, and had a challenging like upbringing herself with, you know, alcoholic father, and, you know, kind of redneck, deep South. And so we went to Southwest Michigan, and she put us in school there. My dad's aunt lived there, and so and my mom went back to school there. She got her degree in psychology, and, you know, we kind of went on with our lives in America. And my mom was like really amazing in that she was like 3 meals a day. She took like really good care of us. She didn't work. She used the insurance money really well, and just like went to school, and took care of us with her spare time. And during that process, my brothers and I were always playing outside and getting hurt and getting taken to the doctor's office, and which was up the street, and it was a small town. And my mom, one of the doctors there was twins that were doctors, and one of them had recently gotten divorced, and so we kept ending up in his office. And so my mom and him hit it off, and so they ended up getting married, and so then we ended up in a step-family scenario. She was also getting her PhD in psychology, so she studied step-family integration, and did a huge dissertation on that. And so it was like a blending of these 2 families. And my stepdad's family was like really amazing, high-functioning, leadership type of people. His brother is a world-renowned management strategist and author, and so I got popped into like a home and a family environment where, you know, world-class leaders lived, and, you know, like they're like a whole different kind of world.
Right.
And also like never really felt like I quite fit in, and so I was always like observing, and I had a really high level of sensitivity because of the trauma, and so I was like feeling everything. So it was confusing, but it was also, I can see back now like how much influence that had on my journey and who I've become now.
Totally. So something to zoom in on here, and I know we've spoken about this before, but the high functioning leader management blended with the psychology. Like, as a young man, like, how did this kind of insert into your worldview, and how did you observe that?
Well, as I was like, all of that stuff was interesting to me. It became even more interesting like as I was coming out of high school. You know, I was, you know, looking for jobs like $6 or $7 an hour or whatever. I'm 16, and then my mom came down one night and was telling me something about how my uncle made $60,000 an hour for his speeches.
Whoa. Wow.
So it was like, it just kind of like, the money thing about like this much per hour, and kind of set me on a different track. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna need to understand the world in order to function that way. It's like, it's not a linear path. And so as I was like approaching college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so I studied economics and psychology, because economics I saw as flawed because it assumed away the humanity right before they started doing any math. Like assuming that all humans make rational decisions about their money is kind of a big faulty premise.
Yeah. As evidenced by existence itself.
Right. But I wanted to understand how the world was thinking about those things and how the decisions were getting made and so forth. And then psychology was to like understand the human aspect of it, and to understand like myself and my own decision making, and like and how that would relate to, you know, being functional in a business environment, or in like a generative ecosystem.
Right.
You know, and then I got pretty early exposed to Gary's kind of philosophy around management and like breaking down the hierarchy, and he has, you know, there was at one point like I just got like the transmission of like this like a structure that would allow for people that were self-led and responsible to interact with each other without the need for layered management, and still be able to like get the thing done. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And where do you expect to find the people that could operate in a system like that? Because as I saw it, most people were giving away their power still. They were like needed a boss to tell them what to do, otherwise they couldn't be motivated. They didn't know what to do next. And so like they needed kind of like the shoop of the paycheck, and then someone telling them what to do in order to actually be productive.
Right.
And so I you know, kind of back then was like, I thought about it, I was like, yeah. And then went into studying psychology and economics, went to Tennessee, got married young, and then kind of like got derailed on my school track, you know, into addiction and like my attempts to manage the pain that I hadn't dealt with from like the early accident.
Right, right. So I've heard you speak about this, and I think it's fascinating and worth mentioning here, and that is command hierarchy and power over. Because you just mentioned like there's these ideas in management theory about a system where there's like self-motivation, self-organization, and like hyper-productivity, ideally. Yeah. And yet you make a great point, where are you going to find a human being that can fit into that and actually like plug in and like fulfill that theory
and actually function? Yeah.
Right. And then we have this other idea, which, you know, I've heard a lot in this community, and I believe light leadership, from my mind and my experience, is a social experiment to find out how it's possible, which is SYNARCHY.
Right.
Which is a bit of a holographic, non-hierarchical structure that is a bit more emergent and allows for the actual implementation of this idea of self-organization, self-motivation, and, well, allowing people to be in their genius and serve the collective with their overflow of energy, attention, gifts, abilities.
Yeah.
And so maybe you can help me
thread those together.
Yeah, how do we weave those two?
Well, I mean, I guess it wasn't like not long after I got married and like found mushrooms, and I kind of went into, I realized that I had like my own journey to deal with before I started to like try and make anything happen out in the world. And so another one of my things, like coming out of high school, before I got out of my like once I was getting ready to leave my parents' house, was I wanted to make sure that my body felt secure in its ability to take care of itself, no matter where it ended up, like in the U.S., for example. And you know, college didn't seem like a very direct route to that, because you know, it was years before you get to any kind of high-paying scenario, and you have to be competitive, right. And like the job market, like I could already see, was starting to decline. And so I went into restaurants and figured, and like saw pretty quickly that like if you get into fine dining, you learn about wine, you can keep a nice uniform, and like learn to deal with eccentric people, then you can make as much as like most people with just like a regular college degree, probably
Right.
more than them.
Right.
And you can work like evenings and weekends and have your whole week free still.
Seems like a great deal.
And so I was in that, got married, like, and then spent a bunch of time like with, you know, psychedelics and my journey in and out of addiction during that time, like kind of exploring my own inner world and like excavating the pain that was in there, and becoming aware of it, but not really having any way to functionally do anything with it yet.
Sure.
And so
Right.
it wasn't until like I got divorced and, you know, lost the house that we had bought to foreclosure, and then fell in love with someone else, and then saw the same pattern play out, but just like 7 times faster.
Sure.
With that person, and then like could see I was seeing it all play out, and I didn't know what to do with it yet, and so I ended up going to Bali, selling everything that I had once I signed the divorce papers. Went to Bali with Coop Blackson on a trip called Boundless Bliss, and spent like, it was 11-day guided meditation, like journey experience, and came back with the tools to like a better understanding of how to like use my external environment and the way that it was impacting me to trigger up the places that needed to be worked on in myself, because like as a way to get to the things that I couldn't get to just through self-inquiry.
Right.
And that led me to moving into my mom's basement for 13 months, just to like let her trigger me until I could get to all of those identity level triggers that were, and deconstruct like the negative image of myself that I would resist.
Wow. So I want to unpack a little bit of this because this is fascinating. So there's this idea of subconscious programs. Some people even call them subpersonalities, or like something like that, where you can become aware of them, as you mentioned, in self-inquiry, but that doesn't necessarily change them. It's
Right.
just like, oh, this is here.
Yeah.
This plays out with lovers, parents,
Yeah.
business partners, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's this idea that triggers, right? If you're triggered, if there's an emotional charge or there's a wound or like defense mechanisms are activated, they're actually rising to the surface of consciousness to be moved, altered, upgraded, or released,
Yep.
right? And so what it sounds like you did, which I've never heard anyone do this, and I love when you shared the story the first time. It just blew my mind and heart open. You intentionally went into the home with your mother and sat in that energy until this cycle could complete itself.
Yeah.
And you could actually remain in presence as a masculine power with an open heart and not get pulled into these childhood identity patterns.
Yeah.
And so what happened? Like, first off, how did you know that process had come to some kind of completion? And then what was like the exit point?
I mean, ultimately, it got to a point where my mom finally got like fed up with the situation enough to actually like kick me out and let go.
Oh, yes.
Like instead of kick me out and worry about me.
Right.
So it was like an actual get the fuck out of here, rather than like you need to leave, but I'm gonna call you and make sure you're okay like every couple days.
Right.
So that like, and so it was like that, like staying in it until, and it was like in that point, and I kind of knew it was happening because like the interaction before that was one where like I was able to, for the first time, stay fully present, like actually consciously keep my heart open and have like, you know, a barrage of what would have normally caused me to contract or fight back coming at me, and actually be emanating love like through that. And so I kind of knew it was over then, and then it was like, I think for her, she needed to like actually just like get fed up enough to just break it and let me go. And so then, and I knew that I needed to go right after that.
Right.
And so I packed my stuff and got on the bus, and then just cried, and I felt like a release and a kind of freedom that I'd never felt before. It was like a tether that had been to my mom, had like always that my partners were always trying to fight with because they could feel that. And so it was like that was gone, and then my heart opened, and it was like almost if you look at the big meta pictures of the universe where it looks like neurocircuitry and like the plasma or whatever, it felt like that was just coming out of my heart, and like I could feel the whole world and like feel everything around me, and the world just like wasn't a scary place anymore.
Wow.
And I went from there like out into the world with the backpack, like my laptop, 4 changes of clothes, and determined never to do anything for money that I wouldn't do for free in the first place again.
Whoa. I want to talk about a rite of passage. I mean, I want to speak to something that emerged in light leadership strongly and has been part of my studies and experience this year, which is the mother wound and the father wound. So for young men, because the mother is the first opposite sex personality in human that we interact with, there's a process that must occur that ancient peoples understood, which is what your mom did. It's the fully releasing of the son into the world without attachment and that tether of like, I'm still gonna mother you. And on your side, that's felt as heart-opening freedom, and for maybe for the first time, like arriving in yourself, right? Because this relationship doesn't exist. And I want to say for women that it's the opposite with the father. So this is incredible. And then there's a whole nother layer in this, which you studying economics and psychology, coming to a determination and intention that you wouldn't do anything for money you wouldn't do for free, which is a wild idea, I think, for a lot of people in consensus reality.
Totally.
Because they do the exact opposite. They do things that they would never do for free, for money.
Right.
To get money.
Right. And to me, that's like a messed up relationship with money, because if I am using money to make me do things that I wouldn't otherwise do, then I'm letting it control me. And so over time, I become out of alignment, and then like my reality has to like break in order to bring things back into alignment. And so I wasn't willing to do that anymore. And I, like, as I was like entering into personal development land and hearing all of the stuff about like, you know, find your purpose and like, what's your gift and blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, my gift's in my fucking blind spot. So if I try and make it up with my seeking mind, then, and like chase whatever thing I made up, I can be pretty sure that that's not it. And then I'm going to need, like, life is going to, you know, do more of that self-correcting. And so it was like, okay, how do I get it out of my blind spot? It was like, and like understanding surrender was understanding like, oh, okay, like surrender is like the moments when I'm really in surrender is when I can't not do it. Like, and so, you know, part of my journey was with addiction was to like sit in front of a bottle of morphine and stare at it while I went through the withdrawals. And just ride that whole thing out with it right there. So I had to stay fully present, otherwise my body would have gone for the bottle. And so, so I built up a lot of restraint. Like I could restrain myself from anything. And so it was like, okay, cool. Then I'm gonna just like not do anything, restrain all action, only follow invitations, and if it's like a task or some kind of work being asked for, like if the yes doesn't come out faster than I can think about it, then
so this is incredible. Like this is like, how do I want to say this? Well, I've heard you say a really powerful phrase, which is like sense and respond. Instead of like follow through with a mental template, like, oh, I've trained myself, I should do this. Like for example, like in like sales or like in the business world, it's like, oh, this opportunity's presented itself, therefore I do it. Even if the body, and as we know, like the body doesn't lie, it speaks very clearly, it was a fuck no.
Right.
But the mind had an agreement to do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And so what you're doing is like kind of collapsing that process and responding only if and only if the yes happened faster than the thought could analyze it.
Yeah. And then it was like, I was trusting that through that, in the ways that I got drawn out through my blind spot, which was the yes before I could say no, right? And most people would think about that as like a bad boundaries or something.
Sure.
But But for me, it was like, oh, well, I want to find out what's in the blind spot. And so I'm just going to restrain everything, even the things I think I should do. And then just wait for that thing to come out, like, as people ask me to, like, ask. And so then it was like through that like I ended up like helping people, and like this gift to help, like, basically sense into people's neurocircuitry and see where there's gaps, and find where there's like stories of trauma that are blocking that up, and be able to help them unravel like really deep, like thought form based energetic stuff in their system that really changes their life without them having to change their behavior, like consciously. Like their behavior just naturally changes.
Right. So I love this idea that the gift is in the blind spot, because I love that you also brought up the personal development, that's peddled on the street corner, which is like, find your purpose and align into it and go all in on it. And I definitely went on that bender myself when I got into this work. But this is profound, because it implies that the gift, like, if you can't be aware of your gift consciously for it to be the gift,
right?
Like, in a way, right? So you started this experiment, you went into it, people started coming to you asking for help.
Yep.
You sense responded if it felt good, you leaned into that. So this experiment started like building. Like, what happened next?
Well, I just kept doing it for free until I was determined to just keep doing it for free until life started offering me money without me asking. And so I was like sharing my story on Facebook and floating around, hitchhiking, or staying with people. And, whenever I would like, not having any money, when my attention would go on my bank account, then it was like, I would have these contractions in my body, and like, it's the same contraction that would usually sent me onto Craigslist to find a job application, or like find a gig, and like go hustle something. It sent me on some journey. And so instead I would just lay there. Like, I would just, if the contraction came on, I would stop wherever I was. Like, if I was at a place that I could lay down, I would lay down. Otherwise I'd just sit there, and I would just like be with like the pain of the contraction, and whatever stories were coming up as I was like staying connected to that pain. Because ultimately, from the knowing that if I'd never heard of money and somebody told me my bank account was empty, it wouldn't affect my body at all.
Right.
So how the fuck is my body getting crippled because some number over there is changing? Right. And so to me, it felt it was evidence of programming in my system that was disabling my body in relationship to that. And so I needed to free myself from that. And so it was like trusting that life was gonna, as I worked through that stuff, that life would start meeting me and offering me money. And so as eventually people started coming to me saying that a friend who had, gotten help from me for free had gotten a lot of help and had told them to contact me. And so when they were reaching out to me in that way, then they started offering me money. And so then I was like, pay me whatever you want. And then kind of let that go for a little bit to see where it stabilized, and set my prices there, and then kind of like went from there.
Wow. So temporally, where are we in the timeline right now? Like, how long ago was this when this shift happened?
That was 5.5 years ago.
And you were already in Boulder?
No, I was just coming from Nashville I was in Venice, California.
Oh wow. Beautiful. I have deep love for Venice. I lived in that region for about a year. So I really hope people listening or watching, you're paying attention, because this is a very powerful practice that I've never even encountered in a human being, but has been intimated, which is like kind of letting the universe stabilize if you want to call it transaction or whatever. It's like letting it meet you where you're at.
Yep.
Instead of just being like, oh, I did this thing, I got a yoga teacher cert, whatever, and I'm gonna like make this up. And I see people all the time that do that, and then like...
Well, that's why they have trouble ever like consistently commanding those prices, or
Right. So awesome. Let's jump ahead to Transformation Agency, because that was my first impression, hearsay of you and your squad.
Yep.
How did that come about? Following this this space of like you just kind of like organically doing coaching, mentoring, whatever you want to call it?
So I came from Venice to Boulder. Didn't really know anybody in Boulder. Just got an Airbnb and just started. My friend Gina introduced me to somebody that was having a party here, and I met Allie there, and just little by little started meeting people in the community. And I was still just doing my coaching and posting, and like just still sensing and responding. Like, what's next? Like, and seeing where life was taking me. And so I ended up meeting Max, and then Diana and Ryan. There was a post that went out called Sexy Conscious Awake, What Sexy Conscious Awake Women Want. It went super viral like back then, and the author Kelly Marceau is here in town, and so I met up with her, and an article that she wrote had me tagged in it, and Anna was in London and read the article, found my website, and hired me as a coach from London 4 years ago. And so like the crew was like, the people were kind of coming together, and I'm just like doing my thing, and pretty steeped in like a spiritual perspective of surrender, like an understanding of the current business paradigm, the issues there, the existential crisis that we're in, the need for new systems, my own uncertainty about how to do it, like, and so just letting things emerge. And so as like this core group of people started to form, it was like, okay, well, if we're going to spend all this time together, like, how do we work together? How do we make this time productive? And that just started a conversation around the fire where just lots and lots of process, and we were creating shared reality, and so Transformation Agency was born out of that. And through this whole alchemy process that the group of us were in, we just really processed through so many collective level, like, polarized issues, like, within the small group, and came into shared reality around them, and then through that, like, a constitution and a structure emerged, and a financial system, and content media, social media distribution systems, and all of that stuff. And so all of that's energetically coded in there, and then a new iteration of the Constitution came out of that, and then Light Leadership, and the six of us that are that came out of that.
Wow. So this is my understanding, and like, stop me at any time. Basically, what I heard you do with this group is, not only were you filming almost everything, like you had some kind of stream, or like, maybe it's not a live stream, but like,
yeah, we've either had a 360 camera up or some kind of film, like, through the majority of this process.
Right. So as the group met any kind of contraction in the field, or any kind of polarity, whether it was personal, romantic, social, collective, ancestral, you met it fully until it lost its energy.
Yeah. And
a shared consensus reality was created in this small core tribe.
Yeah, like a shared understanding of the issue.
And you did that for 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah. Which is just such an epic level, grand social experiment, and I believe, maybe a neo form of how our ancestors would have dealt with issues, because it wouldn't have, those issues, obviously it's different now, they wouldn't have been able to stay in the field and let that society function.
Right. Now, back then, like, my understanding of the tribe was, if there was a problem, you sat around the fire and talked until there was nothing left but the truth. Otherwise, like, you couldn't function, because it would divide,
right,
and become polarized within itself, and start to experience entropy. And so the tribes that were able to evolve to complex social structures would definitely do that.
Right. So after 3 years of this, you reached a sufficient level of coherence in which Light Leadership emerged, which is this like new kind of front-facing seed that has come out of this. And the first one was what, this September? It was after
very
collective
very
witness.
end of September, beginning of November.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've done them almost every, what?
And then there was one like 5 days after that, and then one a month later.
Right.
Yeah.
So to give y'all a perspective here, you know, I want to report from my direct experience, and I'm a self-proclaimed retreat mastermind conference junkie. I used to work for a high-profile nutrition brand. I also, you know, went to a bunch of meditation, spiritual retreats, did my own backpacking journey, and so I felt like I had a really good pulse on what's possible in a group context. Whether it's like, okay, we're gonna get together and do business, or we're gonna get together and do personal development, or we're gonna get together and meditate, right? And having led a lot of these experiences, this experience, Light Leadership, which was last week, was very unique because not only were there zero agreements or context, although you gave out like a PDF, there's like a basic contextual like, you know, thesis on what the experience was. I want you to imagine about 50 people, 40, 50 people in a room, which is a beautiful star house up in the mountains here in Boulder, Sunshine Canyon, where there's almost no like prompt. It's just like, we're here gathered, did like a really basic guided meditation visualization, a very basic tool of how to meet another person in the space, and then
see what happens. Something's gonna happen.
and something did. something definitely did. And I mean, I was just like in awe, shock, and went through all the range of human emotion, witnessing various types of archetypal energies emerge. Some basic ones being just pure on trauma, catharsis, like just strong emotion being fully released. And then that kind of evolved into the masculine and feminine dynamic. There was the business relationship dynamic, like the agreements. And then it kind of merged into, and we just touched on it the last day, like the sex, power, money, more like hierarchical dynamics. Yeah. And these are playing out in various levels. And the only thing I have to compare it to, honestly, is ceremony. Like I'm talking like plant medicine or deep, you know, I come from like the bioenergetic Wilhelm Reich Osho tradition, where it's like you awaken a lot of energy through breath work, embodiment, movement, and then when the catharsis hits, you know, it can be a solo or a group experience, and that energy arc is allowed to fully express itself, which can look pretty messy. Sure. But we had amazing space holders and various forms of superheroes there. And then once that arc expresses itself, the field itself will respond to it. Yeah. And then the next emergence will happen, or the next movement. Yeah. And so this becomes like a symphony of like profound energetics. Yeah. Where you could have never planned it.
There's no way you could orchestrate it.
Like beforehand, if you had told me everything that was going to happen, and we're like, this is at noon, we're going to go through a big masculine feminine purging. Yeah. There's no way. There's no way. Like not only with the breadth, but the depth of the process. There's no way we could have covered it. Yeah. And so this is what I have, you know, in the title here, and I've heard you speak a lot to, which is this idea of surrender and emergence. Yeah. And I'd love for you to expand on that concept as you've practiced it and as you've seen it play out in this group experiment you're now involved in.
Got it. So for me, this journey has been, a lot of it's been like, can I actually trust this life? Like this experience of being alive, like, can I trust it to like meet me and take care of me, or is it a dangerous place that I have to? And I kind of got to the place where I would like, if it's actually not like a supporting, loving world, then I don't want to be here anyway. And so I kind of just like threw my hands up and let it happen. And so, and then I was like, okay, like I can, if I do that, if I just like go with whatever, then likely I'm just going to get swept away without any kind of rooting into this like collective consciousness bubble that's, you know, like all of our, you know, the collective. And so I can just like float around like a leaf in that. Sure. That wasn't satisfying to me. And so I needed a way to orient, like, how do I how do I direct this thing without being controlling and without coming out of the state of surrender? And so it was through that inquiry that I came upon the meditation that we did. And the idea was that, I wanted a way to generate states of infinity, the felt sense of a state of infinity in my body without externally referencing, and with sufficient detail in my imagination to actually encode that feeling with, like, my desires. And so through that meditation and over time, like, returning to it and creating that sensation and learning to emanate, basically my life became a walking prayer of just imagining this world of humanity completely healed and whole, everyone fully actualizing, access to all the resources and connections they need to see their dreams come to life. And then just being in that feeling and then just giving that to life moment to moment as a prayer, under the assumption that anything that I might want that is a smaller desire or outcome than that, like a nice car or, a comfortable house with plenty of space or whatever, like any of those things, from that world's perspective, like, the things that I want don't cost other people. But this paradigm that we're in, like, if I want nice things, then it means someone else doesn't get something, because this way the whole game's set up.
Sure.
And so I didn't feel safe, like, in my own imagination, like, wanting things for myself in that paradigm. And so I needed a place to go in my imagination to imagine my desires, like, conjure them up into a feeling and then bring them here. And so that's essentially, like, the dialogue, the vision. And so I just hold that and let that, like, draw me up and toward it as I just keep cultivating that. And so I don't have to set goals or be really, like, specifically oriented. But as the group came together, then we all, like, would do that meditation together, and then everybody's, like, casting, like, their imagination, like what their imagination came up with from that into this shared understanding of, like, that vision, which makes it energetically stronger, and then it's pulling us all toward it. And so we can all surrender into this ongoing endeavor to embody the principles that we believe would be a part of that environment, right, like, with each other, and thus create, like, an energetic field of possibility and mutually held belief that could, like, help someone else and train faster.
Right. I mean, we're basically talking about anchoring a future timeline now of an earth without trauma and scarcity. And, to quote Aloka, a brother that was part of this and part of several of them, holy love brings up all that is not holy love. And so if we're going to anchor that field together and project our imaginations into this space, then alchemically everything is going to emerge that is not that. Yeah. And then we get to contend, deal, and transmute it, meet it, alchemize it. And that is a lot of what we were doing. Yeah. And it was on personal levels, it was on interpersonal levels, and it was on the transpersonal level, right?
Totally.
Like, and you could feel it when it was transpersonal. Yeah. Because, there's a better word, but people being possessed by archetypes.
Yeah, it's like archetypes negotiating unfinished, quarrels.
Right. Which may have started at the dawn of time, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And so, I mean, it was a fascinating social experiment for me. And one thing I want to speak to, being a strategist, I'm a strategist and just a lover of mind as servant and as, like, this companion, and being, a mystic who has this, like, non-local quantum ability. I definitely could feel my own anxiety and a lot of the people's anxiety with not knowing how it would look in form. Yeah. Which lent energy to the alchemization.
Yeah, to the alchemy and the whole unfolding.
And, like, that was a way it actually was propelled, because no one could predict what was going to happen next. and no one had a context.
We haven't even given them any information to project onto about what might happen.
Which is brilliant. It's brilliant. It's a new way to do business as usual.
Yeah.
And so where do we go from here? Let's see. We create this field. That was really like the summum bonum.
Yeah.
The highest good, right? Is we created a hyper potent field of healing, creativity, imagination, and group dynamic flow.
Yeah.
Like in social physics, which I love, we created like a superconductor.
Yeah.
And it's still present. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, it can't be uncreated.
Yep.
And you'll continue to create these events, which are kind of like a node or an access point for more people to get involved or for people to return and continue their journey. But in your mind, if we're tool using primates that are using small mouth noises, what's a powerful way to work with and meet the superconductor or this field of emergence? Like in your mind, like how do you see us as a community meeting it, and like what can it do, or like what can it not do?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think what seems to be like coming up in dialogue now here in the community is we're actively in the process of creating a multi-organization kind of alchemy portal resource engine here in Boulder, where people can come, like be initiated, create content, become a part of or choose into or not choose into different types of facilitated endeavors toward sovereignty on individual and group levels. So basically creating the vortex that will get people on track with their personal finances, understanding how to be like coherent in a group and to cultivate that level of connection that's necessary, and then how to share their stories, how to get themselves out there with the confidence they need to really be of service, and then even providing some of the tech infrastructure and backbone for that, and then even more pieces that are a little farther out on the horizon, but a whole bunch of stuff coming together, and Boulder's really turning into like a massive vortex and hub for this community that I kind of see them as like white blood cells right now, like
right.
And so this is like a heart that they can come like pump through, get and like pass by the lungs, get some more oxygen, and like go out and keep doing their thing.
Yes. Yes. I love the organ cell metaphor, because it's the one that's most personal.
Yeah.
What I was hearing you say just then, though, is sovereignty. Bringing sovereignty online on every layer of the complex. Financial, personal, narrative, impact. Like,
yeah. And those are all come after like the sovereignty that comes from stable sense making on an individual level, which is what essentially we were working on in Live Leadership, was like giving people like an experience of like a much more integrated and stable sense making experience, and basically transmission of like a framework that allows for more skillful sense making, and then all of those other pieces are a lot easier to work with.
Yes. So that's like kind of the foundational layer, is in your personal universe as a personality, being a sense maker and meaning maker, as human consciousness seems to be, but doing it in such a way that you get to plug and play with others. And that's where the coherence comes in.
Yeah.
And that was to me maybe the golden thread and nugget that I took away, and I'm excited to continue forward as an ambassador and a cultural change mutant. Is like really how to establish coherence in social dynamics. Like this seems to be at the root of so many issues, like how many wars, divorces, economic disasters, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, could be mitigated, if not completely eliminated, by coherent fields between two or more human beings.
Yep. No, I mean, any group, anytime the world like culture has significantly changed or any kind of significant positive change has happened in the world, it was all initially the result of a small group of people with a sufficiently coherent, shared, positive view of the future.
Wow.
And so, it's it's really all pretty simple when you think about it. Like, to get back to that coherence where you sit around and tell each other stories, we're so busy like learning presence in personal development land and that people will say, oh, this is just a story, when it's like, no, that's their life story. It's not just a story.
It's a core essence of their being.
Like it's got the patterns in it that they need to understand. And so, like integrating our life stories and getting into a circle of 6 or 7 people that really know who you are, really can feel like the safety that most of us want from all of our pursuits of power and money and resource and any of the things we could get from 6 people who know us.
Yes.
Or 4 people that know us really, really well, and we know they won't abandon us.
Right.
Like all of the sensations that drive those behaviors would be almost completely alleviated in the human's body if they had that level of connectivity on that small scale level. And so then imagine what kind of thinking comes from that. Like, what if they already have that and they do feel safe? Then, like, on that base level, so then they're coming from like an actual creative place rather than like a fear response designed to an aversion response, trying to avoid something.
Right.
Right. Because solutions that are created from an aversion response don't fly straight.
Right. And they disintegrate eventually because of what I've heard called the law of origination.
Right.
Where an idea, a thought form is originated from, it will carry that DNA all the way through, even if it has short-term success.
Right.
There's an equilibrium event horizon that will dissolve it because it's not true.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
So this is a good time to bring up, and I've been funneled to this idea through so many channels. I was a big student of evolutionary psychology, anthropology, and I just geeked out on that when I first left religion. And Dunbar's number.
Yep.
And what you just alluded to, which is the seed fractal of the Dunbar's number, which I've talked about a lot, but if you don't know, basically primate studies, tribal studies, 150 people around plus or minus is a magic number where you can maintain a deep intimate connection and know enough about them that you identify and feel safe in that fractal. And something else you're speaking to, which is like the next layer of Dunbar's number, is being in the parasympathetic and having a relaxed nervous system and knowing that you're not going to have to be abandoned or employ these aversion tactics for survival. Because at least 4 people in that 150 know you enough to understand your gifts, your personal narrative, and then you multiply that out in the tribe.
Yeah, and then from that 4, then you can be like, you can have a stable attachment or a function, like a stable, clear relationship with 12 or 15 people that's actually quite deep around that, and then it's like through that you can actually have a healthy relationship with 150. And then from that, then you can kind of sense, make, and track up to 1,500, but not anything beyond that.
Right.
And so that's my understanding of the Dunbar numbers. It's like those 4 tiers. Like there's that very core one that in Western culture ends up being our nuclear family, and then nobody ever fully escapes that and recreates it. And so the nuclear family actually isn't a functional version of that, because usually it's a dictatorship.
Right. Which is a mirror of the big dictatorship on its cultural level.
Right.
Wow. So it's like going back to the mother-father wound, breaking that pattern, establishing sovereignty and personal sense-making, and then recreating that seed fractal with peers that are engaged in like deep, consistent, coherent sense-making as that core unit. And then we get to like what has been named a lot, like the council, 12 to 15. And that's a really powerful fractal, because if everyone in that group has the 4 to 5, and we even took it to another level that one night where it's like, let's say they're like fasting and like in deep personal practice, the ideas and consensus reality that group can make is like that can affect the whole 150 and like and link up to that. and actually guide the 150. Say if you took,
you could actually, the whole 150 could be like that, could generate sense making that would animate like the whole 150 quite likely.
Right. And so sufficiently strong council of surrendered leaders that are self-selected or voted, we can get into the semantics on that.
Yeah.
Guiding a 150 then allows that to extrapolate to the 1500, where you can actually track the 1500 and feel,
semi-connected. You would like recognize their face, and you would feel safe to connect with them because they know someone you know at least.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're within like the first 2 tiers of the 7 degrees of separation.
Yeah.
But in a much more meaningful way.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, this is like an ancient future template. That's what I want to name it, right?
Yes.
It's an ancient future template where if we are Gaia's immune system and the planet's intelligent, an existential crisis is approaching from multiple horizons, this is the social physics template that holds the code to not only like avert disaster, but actually transmute it into like the butterfly stage, if we're in the caterpillar stage, or we're in the chrysalis.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like activating and turning on all the imaginal cells.
Yeah. Which is so poetic and beautiful, and like I'm in the service to that. I know you are too. And yeah, I guess next Paul is like, where do you see this going? Like I love how you're talking about like, and Ali is a part of this too, like Boulder becoming this nexus, an alchemy portal where people can come through and experience this magnification initiation, and also get the other tools in place, the tech, content distribution, the alliances that are needed, and then they can go out in the world and proliferate.
Yeah. At this point, we've got a bunch of like, the next place for people to look for us is going to be Costa Rica, like Envision, Superhero Academy. Shout out to Mark Angelo and that crew. And in between then, we're basically just sensing and responding to the ripple that was created with the events that we started, and putting together the infrastructure and doing the team building and stuff that we need to enter this next phase was the couple things that we're launching. And so when we converge on Costa Rica in early February, we'll have like website up and running, online school, a couple events before and after and surrounding. And so, lightleadership.com is a great place to go even right now and get on our mailing list and be in contact. And then that would be a good way to get information about what's going on in Costa Rica, but to really start looking for us to emerge into a more visible kind of phase of our growth journey it's probably February in Costa Rica.
Awesome, yeah. If y'all don't know this, if you're listening, watching, that's where a lot of this tribe community that I've been blessed in this year to be in the trajectory, and how we met at Collective Legacy is part of this squad. Again, David Weber, Mark Angelo, Loca, shout out to all you guys. We're all going to be converging in and around.
Devin and Garrett.
Yeah, Devin and Garrett too. Love you guys so much. Miss y'all already. I'm excited to alchemize there. Light Leadership, Superhero Academy, Envision, Stephen Brooks and Punta Mona as well. Like, there's so much magic.
Freedom culture.
There's that coincidence of freedom culture as well.
It's all freedom culture,
we're building the mycelial network of cultural mutagens that are gonna like kickstart this process. And I guess, is there anything else burning for you, or like, is there anything else that like, I feel like we just co-articulated a very potent myth and overlay.
I feel like we covered a lot of territory. I'm feeling pretty complete.
Well, I want to speak to one other thing, and that is your presence and eye contact is among the most powerful I've ever witnessed. And it feels so good to actually be in connection with you, even while there's all this technology. And that's probably the thing I appreciate about you the most.
Oh, thanks
in this moment.
Thanks very much. It's been such an honor, like, having you in the space, getting to know you, and just really find a kindred spirit there.
Yeah. You use slang memes and language in a way that's after my own heart. So,
okay.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate you, brother.
I love you, man.
So much love, dude. We haven't been this lit since the 60s.
Right? All right, everybody.
Love y'all so much. Lightleadership.com. Paul Cooper is tagged here. I'll have all this stuff linked up in the show notes. We're going to be in Costa Rica. The next Light Leadership will be before that, though.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can find out everything online. Love y'all. Thanks for tuning in. If you just got impacted in any way, share this video out to your tribe. Create your own Dunbar's number. Tag somebody who could benefit from it. Stay powerful, y'all.